You know, it's all very well talking about how to best care for our pets, some of the weird and wonderful things that might happen to them, and how to cope with that. But today I'm talking about the one concept that underpins everything that I do as a veterinarian and everything that you do for your pet as a dedicated, loving pet parent. And joining me in this discussion is the wonderful Dr. Doug Mader, who is not only a triple boarded veterinary specialist, he also has a wealth of experience on the front line of veterinary practice to share with us today. Dr. Doug, welcome along to the show. I'm really delighted for you to be joining us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be with you.
And Dr. Doug, you are someone who has achieved an awful lot in your lifetime and still much more to come. I'm sure you're triple board certified veterinary specialist. And so we could be diving into all manner of different medical conditions and weird and wonderful things from a health point of view. But I guess today we're really going to be talking a lot about a concept that it actually kind of underpins everything that we do as vets, but also everything that our listeners and our viewers will do for their pet family at home, and that's the human animal bond.
Absolutely. People always ask me why I became a veterinarian. And at the time I decided to become a veterinarian, I didn't understand the concept, or I don't even know if Leo Bustad even came out with the term human animal bond. But for me, it's always been about that bond that people have with their pets. And now we know what it's called. And honest to God, the reason I wake up in the morning, my number one goal is do everything I can to support the human animal bond and prolong it as long as I possibly can.
Yeah. So what I guess what is the human animal bond? I mean, it's that relationship between people and their animals, but is there more to it than that? What is it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, that's a pretty tough one in a Reader's Digest or Cliff Notes version. I mean, the human animal bond is basically the American Veterinary Medical Association has a very specific definition for it, and it has to do with the relationship between people and animals, and it has to be reciprocal. We give to the animals give back to us. But the reality is the human animal bond can be any number of things. It can be a young girl playing with her pet kitten. It can be a boy playing fetch with his dog, or it can be bird watchers out watching an eagle nest, and they see the eagles fly in, build a nest, lay the eggs hatch, the hatchlings fledge and fly away, and there's a bond there. So there's not a lot of give and take, but there is, because we enjoy watching the birds, and the birds give back to us by an appreciation of nature. So the human animal bond is really a huge umbrella. In my world that I live in, I have an unusual background. I'm triple boarded, and one of the things I'm boarded in is canine and feline practice. So that little young lady with her kitten, or the boy playing fetch with his dog, is extremely important to me. But I'm also boarded in zoo medicine. And so that eagle, if it gets shot or hits a power line and breaks a wing, and I can put it back together again and release it back to the wild, I've promoted that human animal bond. So it's, like I say, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So for people who are, I guess, primarily pet parents that we're talking about today, it's the fact that we call them pet parents as well. That's the progression of that human animal bond, I guess.
Again, it's really interesting too. If you look at the literature, I've seen numbers as high as 90% of people that have pets consider them part of the family. And I've tried to track down where that number came from. And it's one of those things where everybody quotes everybody else.
Yeah.
But the AVMA did a really good survey a few years back where they sent out thousands of questionnaires, and 36% of all people that have pets consider their pets as child substitutes. So, I mean, that's pretty significant how important that bond is.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think of just the other day, I saw someone in my clinic, and people get very vulnerable with us in the consult room as well, don't they? And that, they said to me, well, we couldn't have children, and so my dog is my child, and
Absolutely.
and the care that they were providing was equivalent to that. It's amazing what people will do for their pets. But has that changed over time? Has the human animal bond strengthened, if I'm thinking in terms of the role that our pets have in our lives? Has that always been the case, or is it becoming more prevalent that people are seeing them as family, do you feel?
I think so. And I think COVID really put a big push on that, because it forced people to stay home, which increased that human animal bond time. And so people spent a lot more time around their pets. It was really interesting, digressing momentarily. because I'm also in practice like you are. And our numbers, our client numbers actually shot up because people were home with their pets more and they started noticing things that they didn't see when they were at
Yeah.
work all day long. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, Fido has a bump on his ear, or Sophie is limping and I never noticed that before. And so our actual client visits increased with the human with COVID. So I do think it has picked up. And now that people are going back to work, that bond is still there. And so now we're seeing some interesting side effects from that. And that is a lot of species, more so dogs and cats, have what's called separation anxiety. And I'm sure you've seen similar. I have a Whippet, and they're like the classic. If you look up separation anxiety, the poor guy, when I leave for work, he gets so freaked out. And, having been home quite a bit and working from home and then now going back to work, he gets really stressed out. But I do think it's become more important because, the world is changing and things are getting expensive, and pets don't really cost a lot other than their basic care. You don't have to take them to ball games. You don't have to go on fancy vacations with them. They're perfectly happy going for a walk down the street with you at the end of the day. And if you've had a crappy day, nothing better than having that pet wag the tail when you walk in the door.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess that goes back to it being a mutually beneficial relationship. That
Oh
that
yeah.
bond works both ways. What kind of benefits do people get from having pets in their lives?
Wow, we don't have time for all of it, but I
Yeah.
mean, there have been some really great studies that have published that show that pets lower blood pressure. Um, for instance, a really interesting one I just read was that children that grow up with pets are less likely to have ADD. Um, People that have had heart attacks, if you've had a pet cat, you have a 40% greater chance of living a year longer than people who have had heart attacks and don't have pet cats. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. The medical benefits are pretty impressive. And another classic one, and maybe where you live, people that live in rural areas that have farm animals, children are less likely to grow up with allergies than people that live in the city. So it's just the benefits that pets bring to humans are just amazing.
Yeah. Is there a negative cost to treating them as family, or believing that they are family, or them being our family?
My sister is marriage, family, and child counselor, and she would argue that no, there's no negative cost. And what I've read and the people that I've talked to, the courses that I've taken, um, I guess the only thing that might be an issue is when you have a pet that is so near and dear to your heart, when it passes, you go through the same stages of grief, the same 5 stages of grief that would use if you went through losing a friend, a family member, something like that. And so, yeah, that hurts. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've had pets that have passed away in your lifetime. I'm in my mid-60s. I think I'm on my 5th generation of dogs since I was a kid. And every time I lose one, it tears a little piece of my soul away. But that's just a sad part of life. And that's something I think that we're all willing to gamble just so that we can still have that opportunity to be with animals.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get all the good times without having that potential downside is the payment for all of that benefit that they bring to our lives. I guess thinking of children and allergies, but I've also read that children who suffer the loss of a pet in their life, and that could be their pet mouse, pet goldfish, it doesn't matter what it is, actually are much more resilient and able to cope with stresses later on in life because they kind of learn those coping strategies at that
Oh,
stage.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a circle of life, and I think teaching children that when they're young and hiding it from them, I think is a big mistake. And teaching it when they're young, as bitter of a pill as it may be to swallow, I think it's an extremely important part of growing up and learning, so that when things like that happen as you get older, you're more able to cope with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Absolutely agree with that.
we had a couple of guinea pigs, and we actually lost one of our guinea pigs over the New Year period, and yeah, my daughter was devastated, and to
Oh,
see
I'm
her
sorry
going
to hear
through
that.
that was not very nice. But I know that it's a very valuable lesson for her, and in a way it was a good reminder for me of the value that all creatures, great and small, have in our life. And yeah, as difficult as that was, but yeah, it is what it is, I guess. And I guess the other thing I've read is that actually people will grieve their pet more strongly than some family members in a lot of cases.
That's true. And where it becomes real difficult is people that don't have pets don't understand that.
Yeah.
So if somebody loses a pet and then they need to take a personal day off work, sometimes their colleagues give them a hard time about it because like it's just a dog, get
Yeah.
another one. It's like, wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa. If you lost a child, you're not going to say it's just a kid, you can always have another one. That's callous.
Yeah.
Well, if you lose a pet, it's just as significant it is to many people as losing a child. And so yeah, that can be difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
But you brought up a point, so let me just share this with you. And actually, maybe I brought it up about having on the fifth generation of pets, um, of dogs. I'm still on my first generation of bird and first generation of tortoise. I mean, really, reality is I've got one pet tortoise named Tracy. I think she's 57, and I fully expect I'll have to find a home for her when I'm long gone. So
Yeah, she might be saying she's on
yeah,
her second or third generation of human.
of humans, exactly right.
Um, Thinking then of the just kind of how we can care for our pets and how this bond affects the care for our pets. I wonder, and this is something that I've been thinking about recently, is there actually a potential negative to the health of our pets because of this strong bond, because of treating them as family, as little people? And I'm thinking here in terms of the way that we maybe mollycoddle them, we're overfeeding and the obesity epidemic, and maybe some of the stimulation that we're giving to our pets. Is that something that you think about, or yeah, I guess comments on
Yeah,
that really?
actually, that's a really good question, but it's quite complex. So let me
Mm,
break it down into some of the parts. I don't think we can overshow affection. That's just my own opinion.
yeah.
Where we get into trouble is when nutrition, and you brought that up, and you hit that nail right on the head. And that's where the people who have their spaghetti dinner and they have something left over, or they make a little extra for Fido. Last thing in the world we should be doing is feeding them people food. Obesity is a huge, huge problem in pets, whether it's dogs and cats, tortoises, birds, anything. We have a tendency to overfeed them, and that's not good. Just like it isn't good for people. I mean, there have been several really good studies published in the veterinary journals how keeping a dog, if you use the scale of 1 to 9, 1 being super skinny, 9 being morbidly obese, and 5 is perfect. If you keep a dog around a 4 to 4.5, you can add a year or more to their life by just keeping them trim and fit. It's the same thing with people. And then the other thing that we see, and it's from my perspective, wearing one of my other hats, not dogs and cat hats, with exotic pets, is that we have a tendency to feed them the way we think they should eat as opposed to what they actually really should be eating. And the pet that comes to mind right away, and I should put that word in quotation marks, are people who keep primates as pets. So let me preface that by saying I do not endorse keeping primates as pets, but people that do tend to make them child substitutes and tend to feed them as humans. And man, they all get overweight and they all end up getting diabetic. So yes, we can definitely hurt them by loving them too much.
Yeah. So, but it's just a way of, yeah, not giving them too much affection as long as it's the right kind of affection. And we're recognizing, I guess it comes from recognizing them as the species that they are rather than the human substitute, and providing for their species specific needs.
Right. And you know what? People forget that you don't have to give a dog a dog treat um, to reward them. Dogs are perfectly happy with a pat on the head and an attaboy, and I love you. And that's all they need. That's all they want. They just want that attention. And so every time you go and throw them a dog going, yeah, they love it. Of course they do. But that's not good for them. But the attaboys are great for them. And,
Yeah.
and the attaboys are going to keep them healthy.
Yeah. And a lot of the time they'd actually probably prefer that if they're not getting that stimulation, that interaction with you, and
Absolutely.
we're using treats and food because we're time poor and we're busy and we're not
Oh, I
giving them
love
that
that term.
attention. Yeah.
That's a great term. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. So I guess we've spoken about all creatures great and small, and that's a really nice segue into your book that you've got there, and the Vets at Noah's Ark, because it's been described as kind of the James Herriot of America, and maybe bringing that story up to date. That's James Herriot is a series of books, if you've not read them, that is definitely well worth a read. They're fantastic, but they're about a vet in Yorkshire at the start of the previous century, and life in practice, which has changed an awful lot. And from the green kind of North Yorkshire Dales to really the gritty urban area in LA where you were practicing, there's a big difference there, but perhaps there's not such a big difference in the stories and the people that you were seeing.
You know, thank you for bringing that up. One of the most humbling comments that I've received from the literary critics is that the vet at Noah's Ark is the first American James Herriot, which to me is the ultimate compliment, because I mean, that's why I got into veterinary medicine. When I was in high school, I was a blacksmith and I was working with a veterinarian, and he gave me this book called All Creatures Great and Small. And, you know, obviously written by James Herriot. And James Herriot's just a phenomenal storyteller, just the consummate writer. And I read the book and I just like, oh my God, I just need to read more. And then I found out he had a whole series. So I read the whole series, and that's definitely what sealed the deal for me and why I went to veterinary school. And I was kind of hoping one day that I would be able to do a James Herriot. And so it's taken me 40 years, but now I've got lots of great stories under my belt, and I've been writing for the last 40 plus years. And I was able to pen this version of it. And what's really interesting, you brought up the point, you know, the common thread is the human animal bond. And I've gone back and I've reread some of his books. And now here in the United States, PBS, which is public broadcasting stations, they've done a series, and they actually have a TV show now called All Creatures Great and Small. And it's kind of fun to watch, because the same stories that he had with his clients 70 years ago, I have with my clients today. You know, it's the woman who feeds her dog too much, or it's the client who doesn't want to pay their bill, or it's the, you know, you stay up all night long trying to save the horse, and no matter what you do, it dies. And that's just the same stories. They're forever, they're ever true, you know. And it doesn't matter what country or where or what part of town or what race, what nationality, what religion you are. People love their pets, and people have the same issues, you know, that same bond.
For sure. I think we all have our own tricky woo that we can think of, and the like. And
Perfect.
if you've
Yeah, you
read the
bet.
book, you'll know you'll know who that is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you saw, you know, a real diverse range of society. I practice in an area where, again, we see, you know, the very wealthy people to people who are really struggling to provide the bare necessities for their own life, and but that doesn't affect the care that they the care that they want to give their pets. And actually, I find sometimes the people with less want to do the most, um,
Hmm.
but that bond is still the same.
Yeah. Well, where we were kind of in a really unique place in the city. And I mean, literally on the cusp between a extremely affluent neighborhood and then the one of the worst parts of the inner city. And the governor of California at the time was one of my clients. And then I had people that would come into my practice and they could barely afford shoes for their children, but they would want everything they could do for their, you know, that was necessary
Yeah.
to save their pets. And I guess you could call me a bad businessman, because I can honestly say in my lifetime, I've never turned anybody away. And if somebody really wants to make an effort to take care of their pets, I would do everything I could, no matter what it costs, to try and help them do that. And I mean, there are people who would give away $5 of their paycheck every week just to try and pay off their vet bill. And, you know, again, that's how important animals are to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you got, I guess, seeing that, and I'm thinking that, you know, our current situation is the cost of living across the world is climbing, you know, the costs of everything is climbing. We've also got a situation where in veterinary medicine, the gold standard care is climbing, but the cost of providing that top level, best in inverted commas, care is also climbing. So many people are struggling to afford the care that they would perhaps want for their pet, or they aspire to. Have you got any, you know, thoughts that would maybe help people kind of navigate this, you know, very challenging situation that we find ourselves in?
I do. And that's an extremely important point. And I think, as you said, there are people who want to do everything they can for their pet, but can't necessarily afford it. And then they have that guilt,
Yeah.
and they shouldn't feel that. You know, it's you never want to have to you never want to put a person in a position where they have to feel guilt because they can't provide the proper care. We have always, in my practice, made it a point to try and work with everybody, whether it's through credit funds, or we have several what we call angel funds, which are nonprofit organizations that help out people in need. We help people with getting funds on the internet. So that guilt thing is something that's real. Everybody feels it, but it's certainly something that you shouldn't be ashamed of. Um, the thing that we're pushing a lot now here in the States is pet insurance. I don't know if they offer that where you live, but I think I just did an article on it, and the last count there were like 22 pet insurance companies, and it's like a buffet line. You can go in and you can get the salad, you can get the salad with the ham, or you can get the salad with the macaroni. I mean, there's a whole menu of options that are available, from basic accident coverage or illness coverage or accident and illness coverage, all the way up to well care plans, which cover vaccines, spays and neuters, normal dentistry. So there's a whole variety of things out there. And I am encouraging my hospital encourages every client that comes in now to get pet insurance, because it's like anything else. I live in the Florida Keys. I live on an island. Okay. I've been paying into hurricane insurance for the last 30 years. And a couple of years ago, we got hit by a hurricane. I would rather pay it and never, ever have to cash in on it. But it's nice to know that it's there and when you need it. Pet insurance is the same way. If you have the pet insurance, it might mean the difference between, can I get my dog fixed that's in heart failure, or was hit by a car, or do I have to say goodbye and make that tough decision? So I'm really encouraging people now to get pet insurance. I think it's a real smart move.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, coming from the UK, where pet insurance is actually really, very popular. And I'm thinking the last clinic I worked at was probably about 50% plus of clients.
Oh,
And
that's
it
excellent.
is, yeah, and it's slowly making inroads here in New Zealand as well. With, I think 10 years ago, people looked at me funny when I said pet insurance, and now everyone's heard of it. They certainly don't have it by any means, but that
Yeah.
conversation is coming, and it's got a great role. But I love that talk of guilt, and people shouldn't feel guilty. And I think the level of care that people are providing for themselves, if I think of dental care, I read about the cost of insulin over in the States, and diabetics struggling to provide their care. My personal opinion is that we can't expect our pet parents to be able to provide in every single situation the level of care that they're not able to afford themselves sometimes as well.
Right.
Yeah, so
And
kind of being,
the concept of guilt goes both ways, because it's also difficult on veterinarians,
yeah,
because we're trained to offer the Mercedes Benz, and you can't profile your clients just because they come in and they've got dirty clothes and they drive an old car. You can't just automatically assume they can't afford care. So we have to offer everybody the best possible care, and that can be sticker shock. Okay. Fido is walking with a head tilt. We may want to consider doing an MRI or a CT scan. How much is that? Well, that's X number of dollars. I can't afford that. So we have to be able to work with our clients and our pets. Okay, fine. You can't afford the CT scan. I completely understand that. But here's some other options that we have that aren't going to be as expensive. They may not be able to give us the same answers, but we can work with that. I've been a veterinarian for a long time, and I've seen this a number of times. So let's skip this step and go right to here. You just have to trust my experience on this one. So we do have to work with them. And again, for me, when I wake up in the morning, my goal is to do everything I can to promote that human bond and make it last as long as possible. And sometimes it means you have to kind of take detours, but the goal is the same goal, and that is to keep things going.
for sure. And I think that to me speaks of the art of veterinary medicine, the elusive art of
Right.
veterinary medicine that that James Herriot was a master of. And I'm sure the
Oh,
stories
absolutely.
in your book show that you are as well, is helping navigate this very difficult journey when this bond is so strong, and you want to do as much as you can, but there's different competing elements to that as well.
Yeah, it sure can be difficult.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Dr. Doug, this has been a wonderful conversation. Where can people go to get your book, or to find out more about the wonderful work that you do?
I have several social media sites. If you're interested in getting my book, my website is www.dougmader.com. So it's real simple. Amazon sells the book worldwide. I don't know about New Zealand, but I do know that they're selling it in Australia. So I suspect it's probably
Yeah.
the same. So those are two sources to get the book. And then I also have a Facebook page, Douglas Mader, and then an Instagram page, Doug Mader. And you can kind of follow along and enjoy my travels and my work with dogs and cats and kangaroos and alligators and a little bit of all the stuff I do. it's a lot of fun. I love being a veterinarian. I love what I do, and I love sharing it with people.
Fantastic. It really is. All creatures great and small. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Doug. I'll leave all of those links in the show notes for everyone listening so that they can order their copy of the book and follow along in whatever platform they prefer. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful to chat.
Again, it's such an honor to be with you, and thank you for the invitation. And I look forward to visiting you down in New Zealand someday.
And to dive more into some key considerations for your pet's health, make sure you check out this video linked on screen now. So tap on that video. I'll see you over there. But until the next time, I'm veterinarian Dr. Alex. This has been a Call the Vet Show video podcast, because they're family.